Hey, Lindsay, welcome.
Hey, yeah,
Uh,
thanks for having me.
and we're talking about grant research, and I thought you were perfect because you are the CEO of Greater Goods Fund. You do grant writing. You have courses on grant writing. You are a GPC, which is a grant professional certification. So I thought you were just the perfect person to come and talk to us about grant research. So welcome.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to be here today.
Okay. Well, I wanted to start because a lot of our subscribers are newer nonprofits. So maybe we can start with some of the mistakes that newer nonprofits can make when doing grant research.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest mistakes is just relying on Google to do your grant research. You will certainly find grants. When you Google grants, you will find something, but you are leaving money on the table if you don't invest in a grant research tool or use some of the grant research tools that are out there. So I'd say that's probably the top mistake is just relying on Google or relying on some free services that are out there, because there are really robust grant research tools that where you can plug in what you're looking for and you can really get a full comprehensive list of everything to go after. And then I'd say the second probably biggest mistake is going after international or national funders before going after funders that are in your local community. So especially when we're just starting out, funders really want to know that you've gained the support of your community. So they're going to look at who has funded you as almost like a seal of approval. So if you're going for national funders before you get that seal of approval, then it's just essentially going to be a waste of time. So, certainly go look for what's around you. Those are the organizations that want to see you succeed and that are invested in your success because you are in the community. So, yeah, those are probably the top two mistakes. Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're muted there.
There we go. My phone broke. So anyway, figures live, right? But I did really want to talk about the grant research tools because I know a lot of smaller nonprofits, they look at some of these tools and it's so expensive, but it's that return on investment because of what they can offer.
Yeah, exactly. So two tools that I recommend more than all the others, just because of their comprehensive nature. So one is Instrumental. They're a little bit newer, but what they do is they pull all the RFPs that are available in your search. So it will show you the due dates, what you're eligible for. And then a cool feature that they have is that you can track your grants in there. So you can see, okay, this one's coming up at this due date. I know that I have to get that in and apply. So it's a really seamless tool, really great functionality. And then my other favorite tool is Foundation Center Online. And these two that I'm mentioning are probably the most expensive. However, they really do provide you with the best results. It's a little bit of like you get what you pay for. But one really great thing about Foundation Directory Online is that you can access it at major public libraries. Most public libraries will have a subscription, so just call ahead. If you live in a tiny town like I do, then they probably won't be there, but I've called around. There is one that has it just 30 minutes away. So, call around. You can access that really awesome tool for free.
I've done that.
Mhm.
In my local community, we have a center for nonprofit organizations that has a subscription, and you can book time to go in. And I was shocked the first time that I ever used one of these professional tools because I was able to put in all the criteria, and I started local, and we ended up getting, for a small grassroots nonprofit, $170,000 in grants.
Wow.
because I took that day to research and then connect and send out those proposals. Uh, so
Yeah.
what other strategies would you recommend then for nonprofits looking to get into grant funding?
Yeah, well, I think you brought up a great point of just actually focusing on research, making research a priority. That's where your grants are going to come from your plan, from finding all the funders out there that you are eligible for. So I do like to talk about like how you find your top 10. How do you know? Because sometimes when you put your parameters into the search, you might get 1,000 funders, and it's like, okay, we don't have time to write 1,000 grants. How do we know how to prioritize these? So what I would focus on is, are they local in your community? That's going to show you how invested they are in your success. Now, there certainly are going to be funders that perhaps support your geographic location, even though they're based somewhere else. And, that's okay too, but they have to support your geographic location. So even if you're a great fit on all levels, if they don't support your location, then they're not going to fund you. So location, if your missions align, so you have to make sure that your missions align, because funders are ultimately looking to fund their mission. They have their own mission and they're looking to you to carry out that mission with their funding, but your missions have to align. You're not going to convince them if your organization does something different than, let's say, than the thing that they want to fund. The other thing I would look at for a top 10 is how big the organization's budget is. Because that's just going to be, they have more capacity. So you might be an awesome fit, missions align, everything looks perfect, but they have a tiny budget and they just don't give out that many grants. I would still apply to that funder. I would just maybe put it a little bit lower on the priority list. And then similarly with their capacity and their budget, you can also look up their 990s and see how much money they give away. So if you look up their 990s or their tax documents, you can do that on GuideStar for free. Just search the funder and pull those up for free. You do have to have a subscription, but you can have a free subscription to look at the 990s. And you can see how much money they give away every year. So if you're looking at the 990s and you're like, okay, most of the grants are about $1,000, maybe they do give away a lot and they have a big budget, but that's just another piece that you'll want to dig into and research, is how big each individual grant is and compare that to your needs. So that's one way to kind of establish a top 10, is if they have high capacity and they give away a lot of money, then you can hone in on those types of funders. I'm just gonna bend down really quickly. My computer is not charged, and I don't want it to run out.
That's okay. That's what happens when we do these lives. I got my mic working again.
Yeah.
I am always shocked so we have a family fund and we have very strict criteria for what we support, and how many times I'm asked for funding that's a blanket funding. It has nothing to do with anything that we support. There's no amount that they're looking for. It's just this cold outreach that doesn't fit, and they go to the bottom of the pile. At least show me somehow how you fit in with our criteria.
Yeah, I do think that, nonprofits, organizations, we're also passionate about what we do, that I think sometimes we think we can convince other people, like, wow, this is such a great cause. If I could just show them how good my cause is, of course they're going to support me. And that's just not how it works. You have to, if you're going to put the time and effort into applying, then it has to be a match. And, you know, I think that it helps you on your end too. Just know I'm not eligible. I'm going to focus my efforts on these top 10 over here where I am eligible, versus trying to go after this funding that just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you stay up to date on the different changes within the, because I know COVID, when COVID hit, a lot of grantors kind of switched, they loosened their criteria, they jumped in to help. How do you stay up to date on all of the changes within the sector?
Yeah, I do find that there is kind of an ebb and flow with different trends that that funders are looking to fund, and I feel like it kind of goes along with the news, what's top of mind. You know, certainly COVID, that was a huge you know, international pandemic, so there was a huge focus there on COVID relief, things like that. You know, if there's a disaster, obviously like disaster relief. But just being in the grant world, you do kind of pick up on, I hate to call it trends. I'd say it's more priorities of funders, and you start to see what funders might be prioritizing at any given moment versus something else. So, you know, something I see with capital funding now is that you will provide, if you're, you know, building a new building, that you will have some kind of sustainable measures to your building. And again, it's just kind of going in and seeing what the criteria is. And when you write the next grant and you're like, okay, I saw this criteria on my last grant. And I'm starting to notice this is a trend. So again, maybe trend is a bad word for that, but like the priorities of funders. So something that I'm seeing lately is if you work with people, then a multi-generational approach to your work. How does supporting the parents also help the kids? You know, that's obviously not relevant to everyone. Of course, equity, you know, a really big focus on equitable approaches. So it is important for your organization to kind of recognize those trends so that they can be priorities of yours as well. And I think that it really helps best practices in organizations too, is when, you know, sometimes nonprofits are a little bit farther behind, whether it be budget constraints or whatnot. So I do think it's important to keep top of mind that these are priorities, this is what's important, and it really helps boost best practices.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen those same shifts with sustainability, diversity, like multi-generational.
Mm-hmm.
And as well, there was another one that I saw recently. Of course, that just completely skipped my mind. Okay, so one of the big takeaways that I'm getting is it's worth the investment for the professional platforms. That's really
or to go to the library.
Or to go to the library and take advantage of that. What else would you add to that for these new nonprofits?
Yeah, I would also say being grant ready. So that's a little bit of a tough thing to grasp. I think that a lot of nonprofits think, okay, I'm going to start this organization and I'm going to fund it with grants. And that's just not really how funders or grant funding works. Most funders will want to see that you have at least 3 years under your belt, that you can show 3 years of budgets, that you've been able to maintain your income higher than your expenses, and that you've shown that you're not going to just close up shop. So I think that that is important to get out there. There's other criteria involved in being grant ready, but that's probably one of the major ones because again, funders, I like to think of it as like a venture capitalist supporting a company. They're putting an investment into you, and they need to see some kind of proof that you are going to spend the money on what you say you are, that you're not just going to close up shop in a month or two. So they do need to see some kind of proof that your organization has been able to run a program successfully. And so, then the question I get is, well, then how do we get started? If we can't get grant funding for 3 years, what are we supposed to do? I would again look at the eligibility. There are grants out there that you are eligible to apply for before that 3 years, but you will be more successful after that 3 years. I would also say individual donors, building up your board of directors, really relying on their networks. If you can host some type of event to bring in your community. And then sponsorships, I'd say for an event or something like that, they're a little bit less strict on that 3-year timeline. So just a few ways. Fundraising is never just one thing. It's never just grants. So you really have to think about all the different avenues that you could take.
Yeah, that diversified funding portfolio where we don't put all our fundraising eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, another thing.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to reference another thing to think about is that when you look at where funding comes from, over year after year after year, the most funding comes from individuals, followed by foundations, followed by, I think, bequests, which is individuals, followed by corporations. So you just have to recognize that grant funding is such a great tool, but it can't be your only tool.
Well, and in speaking of individuals, I know that making connections, those personal connections with individuals is the heart of individual fundraising. So what about with grants? Do you encourage people to reach out and have a conversation before submitting the grant proposal?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, relationships are still important with grant writing. Just like anything else, we are working with people. It really helps to have a personal touch on things, have a conversation. Maybe there's different nuances that you can get from that conversation that's not on their website, or that they can get from you that maybe you didn't portray in your grant application, but it's something that they actually are really looking for. If it's a larger organization and they have a program officer, that program officer is going to be your best friend. Those are the people that are going to go into the boardroom and really promote your application for you. So if there is an opportunity to connect with a person, then absolutely do that. There's not always that opportunity. Some funders will just say, just fill out this form, or, submit a letter of inquiry. And then, that's what you have to do because that's the funder's criteria. But relationships, I would say, are just as important in the grant space.
Yeah. Actually, our family fund was started because of a woman who was the chair for a foundation that gave us a grant, and they invited me to a dinner where they voted on the grant. They wanted me to pitch, and they were so lovely and so wonderful, and they ended up granting to us. But just the fact that they got together once a year and had dinner as a group and came together and voted on what really mattered to them, it just inspired me. And so our family started our fund, and that's what we do once a year, is get together and vote. Yeah.
That's awesome. What does it support?
It supports family violence and addiction. So we had lost our daughter due to she was killed. It was a spree killing, actually, in her he killed his parents too. It was awful. But
Yeah.
taking that grief, and I remembered that woman, and her and I stayed friends. She passed away a couple of years ago, but even when I wasn't with that organization, I stayed friends with her because it's so powerful. The people that we meet doing our job, we become friends with them. We become close with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, something like that, it's so near and dear to your heart, and you want to help people that have gone through a similar situation. I mean, making those human connections, it's not just a transaction.
Yeah. And that's where, if we do that research beforehand and find these stories, then we're able to connect with the grantor on a personal level, or just show that we did our research. So we know, and we're aligned and connected.
Right.
Yeah, if I had one thing to add, it would be it, from being on the other end of it.
Yeah.
Right? Connect with me and show me that we are aligned.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something that organizations miss sometimes, is they think, wow, we're doing this great work, like you should just support us because we're doing all these amazing things. But when you're doing your research and writing your application, and you have that frame of mind that they are fulfilling their own mission, I just think you'll be a little bit more successful when you reframe what you're looking for, and how you write your proposals as well.
Yeah. Anything that you would add before we wrap up, or do you think we covered everything that we wanted to cover?
Yeah, definitely. I do have a grant writing course, intro to grant writing, intro to grant research as well. That's included in the grant writing course, but I have a smaller course for just grant research, and I'm at greatergoodfunds.com.
I'm going to put all of that in the video description so people can reach out. And you know what? Actually, that's one quick question before we wrap up, is what about outsourcing your grant research and your grant writing to a company such as yours? Because I know a lot of nonprofits that are doing it and doing it successfully.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I find is that people want to learn, and they want to know how to do it themselves, especially if they're a small shop, as many organizations are. But then they find that they just don't have the time. Just like anything else, we're running around doing a million different things, and they don't have time to actually put in the work, to do the research or the writing. So, lots of consultants like me here for those situations as well.
Good. Well, again, I'm going to put all your contact information in the description. So thank you again, Lindsay. This is much appreciated.
I appreciate you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.